Redditors who quit their jobs in a blaze of glory. What's your story? Growing up in a small town, the guy that umpires all the little league games was a great umpire, but he had some issues upstairs, like he was somewhere on the autism scale. But like folks with some form of autism, he could pick one thing and focus on it and be good. His thing was baseball. Anyhow, the end of the little league season, the coaches wanted to have a tournament with all the teams in town. I think there was like 6 teams. That hadn't been planned on. The city didn't budget for it. So everyone pitched in to get the fields ready, and the umpire was more than happy to volunteer to ump the games. Anyhow, being that this was now some arbitrary tournament, some parents started giving the umpire a hard time, and by the time it got to the championship game, one guy in particular was ruthless. So finally the umpire had enough, threw off his mask and lost his mind on the dude, going, "Frick you, I have had enough of your crap. You want to have an fricking umpire this game? Do it your fricking self," and on for a couple minutes. And then he got on his bike and ride away. Another parent who played college baseball stepped in to umpire, and the dickhead parent was told to get the frick out. The sad thing is the original umpire never worked for the recreation department again. Like the one thing this dude could do normally was taken away from him. There wasn't even a trophy or prize involved in this tournament. It was just an opportunity for 11-year-olds to play a few more games. Frick man, now I'm P. Parents like that are truly some of the lowest of the low. My small-time office was bought out and taken over by a large company. Suddenly I was told I was just a secretary. My salary was cut, benefits non-existent, and there was nothing legally I could do, because I checked. They did it in such a way that it was if I started a new job. The new office manager told someone that his high school son could do my job for less pay, so in the summer my hours were cut. I finally said frick this and didn't show up. After bullying and tearful trips home, then I began to get frantic emails about how to deposit and split certain payments, how to use accounting programs, how to enter time-sensitive forms. So much whining. I guess nobody trained the boy and just sat him at the front desk. At first it was professional, then it turned to hostility, then begging. This was over the span of 2 days, in which I didn't check my email because I was busy at another job. I finally broke down and wrote an email stating I have all the information they needed stored on a website. At the bottom of the page was a link to Google. I signed it, just a secretary. You are supposed to enter into a consultation role, weekends only or after hours, 300% of your old pay and 4 hours minimum. A couple of my best friends decided to get married in Scotland. We're American. It was quite an expensive trip, so I picked up a part-time job at a crappy sandwich chain for about a year to save so my wife and I could attend. About 2 weeks before the trip, I was offered emergency overtime at my full-time job. I was unsure if I was scheduled to work at the sandwich joint, so I called the owner. He told me I was, which was a bummer, because I could have stayed at my real job for about $30 HR more for the evening. So I went in to make sandwiches. Another employee told me that I wasn't scheduled to work. Rather, someone called in earlier and the owner took advantage of my not knowing my schedule for the week. So I took the spot at the end of the assembly make line, bagged up 8 orders and walked out the door with them, along with a little rack of about 20 bottles of hot sauce. I hopped in my car and took off back to my real job to work that overtime shift with a bunch of sandwiches for the other employees. Accidentally hit send too early. I like to imagine the story's reaction of the customers, and then they walked off with my lunch. Blaze of glory. Not really. Going out. Well, I tired. 20 years old. Working in a car dealership as a lot attendant. Basically parking cars and cleaning up garbage. I am in charge of 5 other lot guys. It wasn't bad, but a new manager was hired. 27 years old, and on a total freaking power trip. In my opinion, that is too young to be in charge of guys who have been working on cars for 25-30 years. Anyway, unknown to me, one day he throws a fit all red-faced and fires 4 of my 5 guys. We were a good team and crap got done. So I get called in on my day off to work, and being the nice guy I go in. Thus is when I find out my guys were fired. I get called into his office and he lets me know it's my fault they got fired and I need to adjust my attitude. I freak out internally. I managed to keep my head. I calmly tell him that he go frick himself and I won't be abused like that after faithfully doing my job. I'm done. And that he can park cars while it is a whole 5 degrees F outside. Before I can leave his office, the owner walks in, tells me to sit and take a deep breath. He sends the manager upstairs. Owner begs me to stay because he needs me to run the customer check-in on the lot. Gives me a small bonus and a $3 hour raise. Manager gets fired at the end of the pay week. Only job I ever tried to walk out of. I worked at the Disney store, not run by Disney at this point, but the children's place. About 6 months as a part-time manager when I was 23. It was a nightmare. Totally disorganized. Full-time managers hated each other, sabotaged each other's performance, and mine. I found out later, when my sales were too good consistently, and the store manager was an alcoholic who would spend the first 3 hours of her shifts with me in the back room, nursing a hangover. Another store offered me a similar position paying slightly more and I got to give the news in the middle of an informal review. That is scapegoating from the alcoholic manager. I gave 2 weeks because I'm nice like that, but knowing they were basically fricked because I was leaving just before the holidays. My last week on the job, I did whatever I wanted. Can't afford the light up fairy wings for your granddaughter? Kid buying mom a present? Just a nice person treating me like a human being? Magic discount for you. I've never felt so good leaving a job. When I worked retail, the place I worked let me give up to 50% off without needing a manager override. Treating me like a human being, got a few customers complimentary 30% off coupons that automatically applied to their sale. I needed a job. I was out of money for school. I, at the time, had about 5 years of trade experience. This was a few years ago, when the backend was still going strong. I took a significant pay cut to get this job. It was in the backend and was told that at 90 days I'd get a review and it'd be worth it. The housing they promised was awful. North Dakota was awful. I held out for 90 days to see this awesome raise, thinking oil field, big money was coming. You're a great employee. We're very happy having you on board. Etc. 75 cents. I thought about it. Said frick this. I have some pride. Scribbled a resignation letter that said here's 75 cents worth of notice. I quit. Left it on supervisor's desk and went home. I got a call the next day. I ignored it. Got a text. Can't believe this is your notice. Yeah, they make a ton of cash out there. They can afford to pay people. Can, but won't. I love asking them to write promises down. The look of momentary panic, quickly smothered by stern disappointment, is always momentarily amusing. Not me, but a friend of mine. He was a cook at a busy restaurant. The general manager was a real butthole and treated employees terribly. My friend and another cook got fed up and decided to quit with a bang. They were working a busy Sunday brunch and they started slowing down the orders. The uncooked orders kept stacking up and up. Then they told the manager off and quit. The whole restaurant was mayhem. The restaurant had to comp like a 100 meals. I don't think the manager learned his lesson. I worked at a travel agency as an in-house web designer. I also did general office tasks. One day my boss, who boasts about traveling 120 days a year, decided to go on vacation in Europe, along with most of the office, leaving me to hold down the fort. I was fine with it, since there was likely very little work to be done and I was going to make a lot of extra money. When he got back, a customer complained that their cruise they had booked online was cancelled. I was blamed for it because, apparently, I was supposed to process their payment in our system. Bear in mind, this was not my client. I had no knowledge of any responsibilities toward this client, and it was not part of my normal duties to process any payments. So at the end of the day my boss took me to the back room, a cramped, uncomfortable space, to talk to me about how I had fricked up. I denied everything, because this was my boss' way of placing the blame on someone else for his own mistakes. He told me to take 2 days off to think about how I can grow with the company, and finished by tapping my shoulder and saying grow up you mergo and giving me a douchy looking smile. To top it off, he had also reduced my hourly rate by $1 per hour. After I had worked there with distinction for almost a year, I was absolutely livid. As soon as I left for the day, I went home, chilled out, and starting planning my next move. The next day I applied for a couple of jobs, and got an interview on the second day at another company. I was offered the position and started a couple weeks later. When I went back to the travel agency, I sat down and waited for my boss, who always had a habit of coming in late. Once he did, I said, quite loudly, "Boss name, I came here to let you know that I quit. I don't want to continue to work for you for less money. I also expect to find my final check in my mailbox by next Monday at my regular pay rate." He only replied with, "Do you have a timesheet?" To which I said, "It's your responsibility to keep track of my hours, so you'd better have them." He then said, "Okay, have a nice day," and that was the end of it. I ended up taking him to court later over unpaid wages, and won. Not the best way to earn a severance, but it works. It wasn't a blaze, but it was the best feeling. My husband and I were working at a crappy call center while in university. We had gotten the notice that the company didn't get their contract renewed and would be shutting down. Things got intense because people kept quitting and they had just launched the iPhone 5, so the calls were insane with people asking about where their phones were. So many angry people, call after call. One day during lunch I was talking to my husband about how I couldn't stand it and that we should just not say anything and just walk out the door. Now I have suggested this before on a stressful day and my husband would calm me down, make me laugh, and I would get through it. Today though he just said okay. So we got our stuff together, walked out of the building and didn't come back. We walked the 1-hour walk home that night. The day was beautiful and our lunch period usually fell around sunset. I remember the sky was so red and glowing that night. The lake we walked past looked like it was on fire. And for the first time in a long time I felt peace and freedom. I felt like I could breathe. We walked in the mostly silence all the way home. It was perfect. I worked in a call center during college and man, no gimmicky incentives they had for us ever made that tight anxiety in my chest go away. Hitting benchmarks, your calls being monitored, following the script to T, being berated by callers constantly. After a year I realized I would rather be unemployed than work there another day. I quit my job at Papa John's because I had a manager who had to have been the biggest dickbag in town. He yelled at everyone constantly and made the working environment toxic. A few months after I quit, somebody threw gallons and gallons of paint all over his Hummer. The only reason I found out about this is because he sent police to my apartment to confront me about it. I didn't do it and the cops had no evidence to support it, so they just left. I had a great laugh. He kept sending me threatening texts after that happened. Finally I had enough and texted him. The one positive thing about this entire situation is that somebody else in town thinks you're a bigger butthole than I do. It was so satisfying. Worked for a large home improvement chain for 90 days as a cashier. Quit on my 90-day review. It sucked. Customers were jerks. Spread little crap all over the handle to the bathroom stalls. Weird customer wanted to talk about my dong. Parents leaving their kids with me as a babysitter without saying a word. Retail was clearly not for me, and this was all within the first 3 months. Now, I was willing to do whatever they needed, so this ended up meaning that I would be the contractor cashier, the guy at the far end of the store with no one to talk to. I got the morning shifts, be there at 5:30. What contractor works at 5:30? No one. I was bored as heck, wasn't allowed to leave my booth area, had to stand up the whole time, and couldn't even read a book. But frick it, it was a job. Well, these large companies don't want to pay health insurance, so they refuse to give you over 25 hours a week to keep you part-time. I needed another job. I offered to give the store my nights and weekends. They said no. I offered to give them my days. They said no. So now I feel stuck in a part-time job without set hours, making minimum wage. Maybe they'll move me to full-time or my 90-day review will be a nice raise. My 90 days were up. My boss calls me into her office. She tells me I'm doing a great job and will receive a raise. Great. Would you like to see the raise, she asks, as she covers the paper with her hand and stares at me excitedly. Yes, please. She moves her hand. 23 cents. 23 fricking cents. At 20 hours a week. $1 a day before taxes. Frick. Okay. Listen, I have to be honest with you. That is insulting. I've tried working with you here for more hours, or to get a second job, but nobody wants to make it happen. To top it off, you aren't even giving me enough money to buy a Coke out of the vending machine. This just isn't going to work. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to the break room now, taking off my smock, grabbing my things and going home. I won't be in again. She stares at me horrified as I walk to the break room. On my way out I am stopped by the HR person who wants to know what's going on. So I explain the situation. She is upset that I didn't ask her about my hours changes because they seem fair. I told her that the store manager, her boss, was the one to shut down the idea, and that I shouldn't have to undermine him to make something simple like that work. Well, you really should be giving us 2 weeks notice. I would have been glad to work with you if you guys showed any willingness to work with me in return. However, I've seen none of that in my time here. How about you give one of the other employees more than 25 hours of work and figure it out? I know you can do it. And I went home, found another job the next day, felt awesome. I got a $0.05 per hour raise working for freaking Apple Inc. on their tech support line because I was too good. I was creating an unrealistic expectation of future support capabilities, and yes, that is a direct quote. Walk the frick out. Not quite a blaze of glory but an orchestrated departure. I was planning on retirement this year at 50, but because I was under official company minimum early retirement age, 55, I would have left with little after 18 years. Our department manager was pretty clueless and regularly abusive to his staff. Over the last year I did what I could to pee him off any chance I got, while still doing my job exceptionally well. In September I called him out under our HR policy for harassments to senior management and demanded that actions be taken. Because I was a grunt worker and he was a senior manager, they sided with him and released me without cause. I received 18 months severance pay, 1 month per year service, plus my annual bonus, prorated. TL. Doctor. Pee off my boss and got fired with a big severance instead of quitting and getting nothing. Worked in a pub. Had my hours cut from 40 PW to 6 PW. Then on my latest paycheck saw that they'd been paying me below legal minimum wage. There'd been an increase that they'd ignored. Went into the pub manager. Asked him for the difference. His response was, how long is a piece of string? Got out my calculator. Worked out the exact length of said piece of string. He got pissy, marched to the bar, grabbed a handful of cash, far more than he actually owed me, and sent me on my way. It was terrifying to stand up for what I believed in, but hey, it worked out for the best. I was being tormented at work. New leadership wanted me out. Basically gave me the Milton treatment. I finally secured a new job at a different company. My B of a boss lives in another city. I typed a short resignation letter, put it on the fax machine, made sure it went through, and walked out the door. The B then called me 30 minutes later telling me she would decide when my last day was. I laughed at her. Best day of my work career. Faint dang it feels good to be a gangster is heard playing in the distance. I used to work in an aquatic center many moons ago. I'd worked there several years and all my colleagues were really good people, intelligent and passionate about the business. The company owner however took real liberties with his staff, paid less than minimum wage and pushed employees to work beyond their job description, whilst being a general to boot. One employee in particular had worked there for several years, worked harder than everyone, was made to do the owner's personal bidding like his washing and cleaning his car etc. and was paid sweet F all which he used to support his old mum who he lived with. The problem is, nobody ever spoke up against him as everyone needed their jobs. No matter how bad it was paid, it was better than nothing. The day I decided I was leaving I prepared a hefty stack of legal papers and a note. The note effectively stated that, firstly, I was leaving my job, but secondly, here's a list of all the times he's underpaid staff illegally, overworked his staff, taken advantage of them, illegally paid cash in hand, avoided taxes, and generally been a crappy boss. I explained that he's got away with it this far, but it's only a matter of time until the staff that he treads on rise up against him and or leave. I explained that it only takes one message from any member of staff to get him into a lot of trouble, but they haven't. I told him he needs to start taking care of his staff, treating them with respect and paying them a fair wage. I never heard back from the boss himself, but the following evening I got a call from one of the members of staff saying the boss came in that day, gave everyone a pay rise, increased holiday days, and personally thanked everyone for their hard work. Not exactly a blaze of glory, but I'm happy I managed to help those who stayed. Not me, but my buddy worked cashier at MCD's. One particularly trying day, with a full line at his register, he just said I'm out and crawled out through the drive-thru window. Funny side note, his boss called him the next day to ask if he was coming in as he didn't officially quit. Must have been awkward returning the next day. Quit a summer job as loudly as possible because they were paying a newer employee .50 more than me an hour because her dad was on the city council. It's not what you know, it's who your dad knows. It wasn't really a blaze, but I worked in a big oil company and was about to switch jobs due to a better offer. Somehow through connections I learned that my current employer was about to let a lot of people go, so I signed up for my new job with a start date 6 months from then, waited for the announcement of severance packages, then cashed in 12 months payment, effectively earning a dual salary for 1 year, and took a 3-month vacation. I left that job with a huge smile on my face. It wasn't really a blaze, but I worked in a big oil company. That would have been something, huh? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.